And no one wants to see their family get killed. And no one wants to kill other people's families because tribes have a greater deal of empathy with each other. So beyond a bit of sort of ritual posturing, you know, these competitions were much more like, almost like dances. Like a dance between the two tribes, is to decide who was going to exploit that river and who was not. So, you know, the evidence actually looking into this time prior to civilization tells quite a different story than the story that civilization has told about tribal people. Okay, so we look at grain stores as the foundation of hierarchical civilization, and how this has led us to start to change our way from being in harmony with the environment to start to exploit the environment. And really, I see this as connected. Civilization started to connect people to abstracts, so that we developed notions like nations. You know, which are entirely mental concepts. They have no objective reality beyond perhaps a bit of a mountain range or a bit of a river, you know, sort of being natural barriers to movement. But the idea of the nation is all in our heads. You know? But here we have a world which is riven with conflict between nations and disparity between nations and injustice between nations and trade and economics and so forth. But all these ideas are all part of the idea that sustains the old culture civilization, the new culture civilization viewpoint, which of course is about centralising. Now, whereas the old culture saw us as part of the world, you know, and worked through cooperation inside the tribe, not domination from the top. The new culture, civilization. I'm just going to move on a bit here because I've already covered most of this so far. Here we are. Yes. The new culture saw things quite differently because it's all about control of that grain store. Metaphorically anyway, the control of the resources and being able to say who gets access to the resources. You see, in the tribal culture, everything was shared. You know, the chief might have a nice hat, but that was about the limit of it. You know, extra care and more beads and a feather or two. But the new culture started to see it. Okay, well, if I'm in control of wealth, said the sort of the leader mindset, you know, then I have to flaunt my wealth. So I have to have more wealth. I have to show that wealth. But it's basic common sense. If someone has 10 times as much wealth as they used to, 10 other people have to have 10 times as less. And this is reflected in creating status. You know, so I understand the status, you're working class, you're middle class, you're upper class, you're at the top of a pyramid, and you're kind of the guys who make it happen for us in the middle of the pyramid, and you're the guys who do exactly what we're told to make everything in the bottom of the pyramid, you know? And I mean, today we have a world, it's crazy, but it's so true, where 1% of the people in the world control 99% of wealth. And it doesn't matter what country you look at, it's the same story the world over. And this is the end result of this whole kind of control of resources that civilization introduced, you know, through the grain store, which became the market, which became the bank, you know, and this is the story that civilization has told as a result, because, you know, PR, propaganda, they've always been with us, because if you can influence and limit how people see themselves, how people see the world around them, then you can maintain the existing story which we all live in. So, I mean, one of the deadliest myths of civilization has been this one, which is that civilization, city-states, came about as a result of technological innovations, giving people more free time. With this free time, they produced art, literature, and religion and explore the cosmos, whereas primitive people don't have time for such things because they're scrabbling for existence all the time. It's a complete myth. It's a complete myth. Let's look at our modern world. Let's say that you aspire to success in modern society. You're a company director. You're working 60, 70 hours a week. That's going to be a reasonable average for a company director. This is the aspiration of societies, that we should be these kinds of people. We should go to university and get these degrees and go and fulfil these roles. And we're working 60, 70 hours a week. But because we've got all this status to maintain, we've got to have this big house, we've got to have this big car, and we've got to be able to go on these expensive holidays. And so all of this effort is simply going into maintaining this edifice of who one is. On the other hand, millions of homes across the UK, across any country, if we care to mention, certainly any first world country, it now developed to the point where we have two people, each working 40 hours a week, simply to cover the bills, buy the food, and pay the mortgage. Now, in contrast, in a tribal culture, people worked on an average of about 10 to 12 hours a week. So, but because of controlling the grain store, that led to being able to demand far more from people to justify their portion of the bowl. Because if you've got one person having 10 times as much, but you've got to find ways of keeping the 10 people who've now got 10 times less actively involved in the whole thing. So this is part of mythologies that civilization has sprung up around itself. But these are all stories. These are all stories. Now, one of the things that to me, a few minutes ago, I started talking about how the story that cultures tell each other shape their reality, and I also talked about how Homo sapiens has been around for 200,000 years, just as intelligent as we are today, and it started me thinking about how that works. We see, if you've got telly anyway, I see a bit of telly on the internet and stuff. I don't actually have one myself, but you see these survival programs where they take someone who lives in the middle of the urban sprawl and they dump them in the Australian outback and say, right, go and work out what cactus to suck to stay alive, or something like this, And inevitably, the so-called civilized person makes a complete arse of themselves and makes all these survival mistakes, and then a couple of Aborigines just come along and rescue them, And the point is that our raw intelligence is not what adapts us into the environment in which we live. If we just sort of land on the planet and didn't have a culture to support us, we've got to work it all out from first principles. We'll work it all out from first base. So although we like to think of ourselves as being civilized and therefore obviously vastly superior to all the people who lived before, the truth is that we're not. And that the tribal cultures represent tens of thousands of years of adaptation to the environment, and an intense cleverness, absolutely intense cleverness, very focused cleverness, to really understand the natural cycle of life going on all around them. How do you know what plant you can eat without dying? How do you know that if you mix this and this plant together you get a medicine that you can use to treat a wound? Or how do you know that this plant draws out that parasite? It's an enormous accretion of knowledge and experience. And now, certain psychologists, like Jung, for example, have talked about the collective subconscious. And I like to think that there's a collective conscious as well. But it can also argue that the subconscious is aware of itself on its own level, but that's